There are 298 prisoners on death row in the state of Florida. This is part 34 of the series. VAHTIECE KIRKMAN, 45 years old, 15 years on death row. Following his 2006 conviction for the murder of Doris Knowles, KIRKMAN received a death sentence. Doris Knowles, a 22-year-old former beauty queen, was buried alive by KIRKMAN in 2006. It took 4 years after the tragedy for her body to be found. The victim was brought to a forested area where she was later bound and gagged according to the conclusions of the investigation. After that, she was coated with concrete and dropped into a hole. For the 2006 murder of Willie Parker, KIRKMAN was already in the midst of a life sentence. Gary MCCRAY, 44 years old, 15 years on death row. MCCRAY was found guilty of shooting dead Robin Selkirk, 45 years old, John Whitehead, 37 years old, Philip Perota, 53 years old, and John Oliver Ellis Jr., 51 years old, at an Orange Park home in 2004. With a powerful semi-automatic weapon, each person was shot. Due to the fact that MCCRAY and 3 of the 4 victims were both apprehended in a previous drug raid at the same location, the prosecution claimed that the deaths were drug-related. When MCCRAY was deemed incompetent to face trial, the trial was postponed for years. When it eventually started, MCCRAY outbursts caused multiple delays as he scolded Judge William Wilkes, threatened to dismiss his attorney, and constantly stopped proceedings. William SILVIA, 58 years old, 14 years on death row. SILVIA was found guilty of killing his estranged wife and given a death sentence by the state of Florida. According to court records, William SILVIA walked over to Patricia SILVIA's house and used a shotgun to kill her. He then shot his mother-in-law, Betty Woodard, but she survived. Michael Woodbury, 48 years old, 5 years on death row. For a prison murder, the state of Florida gave Woodbury the death penalty. According to court records, Michael Woodbury killed Anthony's Haynes in his cell while he was serving a life term for a quadruple homicide. Woodbury and his alleged victim had only been residing in the same cell together for 8 days. Using a metal lock to shut the cell door, he allegedly beat and tormented Haynes for more than 2 hours while threatening to kill anyone who entered. Barry Knotzel, 49 years old, 3 years on death row. For a prison murder, Knotzel was given the death penalty by the state of Florida. Barry Knotzel and Jesse Bell were accused of killing Donald Eastwood Jr., a fellow prisoner, and trying to kill a prison officer at the Mayo Correctional Institute. The 2 murderers who have now been found guilty declined to go to trial and gave up their right to a sentencing hearing. Additionally, they took on the role of their own attorneys and declined to allow legal representation throughout the sentencing phase. Timothy FLETCHER, 39 years old, 11 years on death row. After almost 2.5 hours of deliberation, Timothy Wayne FLETCHER was found guilty of the death of Helen Googe, age 66. The case started with a jailbreak and finished with FLETCHER and co-defendant Donnie Ray Brown being sought after and apprehended. The sheriff's office claimed that both men already knew one another and were incarcerated in Putnam County. Brown had been detained on suspicion of armed robbery months before. 3 counts of failing to appear in court on an accusation of serious assault landed FLETCHER in jail. He and Brown were both accused of participating in an armed robbery. On April 15, 2009, around 2 in the morning, they broke out of the jail after FLETCHER brought a car jack into the facility that he had taken from a correctional transport van following a court hearing. They pried a toilet out of a wall with the jack, crawled through the gap, and exited. Just hours after the escape, Googe was discovered dead in her Barden Road house. She had been killed by being strangled in exchange for a revolver, some jewelry, $37, and her car. When he had nowhere else to go, she and FLETCHER's grandfather had taken him home for around 4 months about a year prior. David RUSS, 61 years old, 14 years on death row. For a robbery murder, the state of Florida gave Russ a death sentence. In accordance with court records, David Russ broke into Madeline Lanan's home, hogtied her, and repeatedly stabbed her. After killing the victim, he immediately sped to the Fairwinds Credit Union in Apopka in her Toyota Camry. There, he made an unsuccessful attempt to use an ATM to withdraw money from her account. His actions were filmed by a security camera. Joshua Altersberger, 36 years old, 14 years on death row. Altersberger shot Sergeant Nick Sotile after leading him into a false feeling of security following a routine traffic encounter. Altersberger abruptly reached for a revolver and shot the trooper in the upper torso while Sotile was starting to relax. He pointed the gun out the window of his car and attempted to squeeze off more rounds into Sotile's head as the veteran Florida Highway Patrol officer lay bleeding on the side of the road before accelerating away. 9 Florida Highway Patrol troopers in uniform, together with Sotile's wife of 24 years, Elizabeth, and his 2 children, Heather and Nicholas, attended his hearing. By a vote of 9-3, the jury recommended that Altersberger be given the death penalty. Eric Patrick, 60 years old, 14 years on death row. In 2009, Patrick was found guilty of killing Stephen Schumacher by beating him. He reported to the police that Schumacher made an attempt at having sex with him. After serving a 9-year prison term, Patrick acknowledged that he had been specifically targeting LGBT individuals. For hog-tying, beating, strangling, and robbing a 72-year-old man in Oakland Park, Patrick received the death sentence. Raymond Bright, 69 years old, 14 years on death row. For a double homicide, Bright was given the death penalty by the state of Florida. According to court records, Bright used a hammer to kill Derek King III, 20 years old, and 16-year-old Randall Brown. The murder took place at Bright's house. He stated that after a battle for the weapon, the two attacked him after threatening him with a gun. King received 20 additional blows to the rest of his body, in addition to 38 hits to the head and neck. Brown suffered 14 more injuries to his body, in addition to 8 to 10 distinct fractures in his skull. According to the testimony of doctors, both also displayed indications of defensive wounds. Dante Hall, 39 years old, 14 years on death row. Hall's girlfriend, Angel Glenn, was employed as a stripper to perform at the party on September 9, 2006. She informed Hall of the gathering. Together with 2 other masked men, Orlando natives Hall and his twin brother Dante Hall robbed the partygoers and started shooting at those they thought were resisting giving them their money. Anthony Blunt, 35 years old, of Mount Dora, and Kisson Evans, 32 years old, of Tavares, were shot by Dante, the ringleader. Glenn received 10 years in prison for testifying against the brothers. The identities of the 2 other intruders remains unknown. Michael King, 52 years old, 14 years on death row. King was given the death penalty for the kidnapping, essay, and murder of a Northport mother after the court concurred with the jury's verdict. Killing Denise Amber Lee resulted in King's conviction. He was connected to the crimes according to DNA evidence and a 911 call Denise Lee made using his cell phone. On one of the numerous 911 calls made in relation to the kidnapping, Lee's cry for aid could be heard. Although a driver was able to describe the vehicle and its position, patrol officers searching for the 21-year-old mother of 2 were never informed of the call. Matthew KIRKMAN, 48 years old, 14 years on death row. Melinda Henson was essayed and strangled by KIRKMAN, a registered sex offender, at the Value Lodge Motel. The defendant was staying at the same hotel on the west side as the 13-year-old victim and her family. The girl was essayed by KIRKMAN in his room before she was strangled to death, according to evidence and witnesses in the 2009 trial. His concealment of her body led to its discovery 2 days later under the bed. David Martin, 37 years old, 13 years on death row. Martin was judged responsible for the beating death of Jacksonville resident J.C. Lynn McWilliams, 23 years old. On a lonely wooded road in Middleburg, McWilliams' corpse was discovered in March 2008. She received multiple blows from hammers to the head. At the time of the murder, the two had been dating for roughly 6 weeks. J.C. was employed in the service division of a Florida car dealership at the time of the event. On March 11, 2008, J.C. was last observed at work. The last time anyone heard from her was around 9:22 p.m., that same day when she spoke with her mother. The authorities discovered a pair of glasses, some slippers, some coins, and what seemed to be a bloodstain on the ground in the vicinity of where J.C. Williams's body was discovered. Her pockets were also turned inside out, and her top was pushed up, indicating that she had been dragged. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.